Okay, good morning to everyone, and good afternoon to our colleagues in Europe. On behalf of the CarIPI team and the EU IPO, and also the Bureau of Standards of Jamaica, I wish to thank you for joining us today as we present and discuss the CarIPI's GI manual with you. So welcome and thank you for joining us. I am Wendy Hollingsworth. I am the IP expert and activities coordinator for the CarIPI project, and I will be moderating for the session today. We will now start. We will get into the next session, which will be the substantive part of the meeting today, and that is a presentation of the CarIPI GI manual. And to give a bit of a context, this manual was developed. It came out of work that was being done in the project where stakeholders were asking for a manual to substantiate or to go along with a GI model law that was developed by during the project. And so this GI manual is actually designed to address, provide guidelines to producer groups, to the IP offices, as well as potential control bodies. Our first speaker for today is Audrey Arbert, who is an expert with working on the project with CarIPI, and who has developed the GI manual along with Ms. Tyra Green. Audrey will present the various aspects of the manual and provide a brief context for which the manual is being developed. Audrey is a freelance consultant specializing in developing quality scheme and management strategies, developing certification tools, assisting with the development of producers' organization. She's a senior legal expert on intellectual property and food law and labeling issues. She works with producers who are wanting to promote and protect the quality of their products as GIs, as organic products as well. And also she works in building out their branding strategies. In this context, she has worked in countries such as Indonesia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Morocco, and definitely within the Caribbean. Audrey, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Good morning to all of you. It's a pleasure for me to be with you this morning and to present a collective work we did on providing some information for the Caribbean stakeholders to develop wider the GI products. So I will share my screen. Okay, and I will start from the beginning. Okay, that's it. Okay, can I admit? No, that's fine. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will present. So I will present the work we did since, if I'm not misunderstood, more or less 1 year or 1 year and a half, trying to explain to you, and well, Wendy did it already, what are the objectives of this manual, the approach we chose with our colleague, and trying to present not in a very developed way because it's a huge document, but trying to explain to you each part and the content of each part of the manual, because we have different types of stakeholders that were targeted in this manual, and then there is no Q&A session for each chapter. We'll let the Q&A at the end of this webinar today. So don't hesitate to put your question on the chat, and we will try to answer your question afterwards. Okay, so as a matter of introduction, just to let you know who were the beneficiaries or the targets of this manual. As mentioned in the tender, this manual was dedicated firstly to the producers I mean, the Caribbean producer willing to follow the GI strategies, but also the IP offices trying to explain the procedure of examining the GI application, and maybe trying to manage also the GI protection, and also a last part which is dedicated to the control bodies like Bureaus of Standards, trying to explain how the GI system and the GI specification can be controlled by this specific type of organization. So we develop this manual in a practical way, trying to be practical, but we also, based on our experience, try to introduce all the information and the important information for the producers and all the stakeholders. And also there were some presentation of this manual. I think this is the third time we present the work we did, trying to collect the comments of all the stakeholders in order to improve the information content in the manual. So don't hesitate to make your comment, and we will try to improve the final version. So what we did in terms of implementation of the project, very briefly, we undertook a legislative review of all the national law, and also, as I was involved in the drafting of the GI law, the GI type law, we tried to introduce in the document all the information we had based on the national legislation existing in the country, but also in the model law we developed. We also tried to collect all the GI protection practices, and also, practices, but also the examination practices, which were very important in order to feed the document. Also, based on the experience we have in the region, but also in other countries, we tried to collect also some information based on the control practices. And then, well, all this information was dedicated to provide some concrete inputs for all the stakeholders in order to have some practical guidance collected in this guide, in this manual. So I will present the manual we realized based on these different types of information. So we decided to divide this manual into 4 parts, and for us it was very important to introduce the manual with a general chapter based on what we call understanding the GI. I mean, the definition, providing all the horizontal information on the geographical indication, which is necessary for all the stakeholders to know before entering in a GI strategy. So we develop a full chapter on the basic knowledge on the GIs. So in this chapter, you will understand what is a geographical indication. We try to explain why GIs could be important for some producers and from some territories. We also develop a paragraph on the protection of the geographical indication, as the geographical indication is a specific intellectual property right, that provides specific element of legal protection, which is not the case for other IPR tools. We also mention some specific international agreements that are applying for GI matters, and also some best practices collected from other countries. So in this chapter 1, you will find all of this information, which is horizontal information that can be used by anyone in relation to geographical indication matters. So In concerning the basic knowledge on the geographical indication, we try to provide some explanation on the definition. So we collect the international definition of the geographical indication that we can find on the WTO and TRIPS agreement. We defined the purpose of the GI, which is to identify products' origin and its link, because geographical indication protect a special link between the product, its characteristic, and the territory where it comes from. And also we try to insert some specific illustrations based on obviously European or international geographical indication, but also some specific GIs that have been recognized already in the Caribbean region, like the Rhum of Martinique for France, Habanos cigars in Cuba, Trinidad Montserrat's cocoa for Trinidad and Tobago, and Jamaican jerk, you may all know, in Jamaica. So we also highlighted the importance of geographical indication because it's a multifunctional tool. So what is important when it comes to GI matters is to have in mind that when you look for the protection of a geographical indication is for several purposes. So we have the transparency for the consumers or for the market, we have the marketing tool issue, we have the legal protection, but also we have all what is connected to the economy and the economic strategy of the value chain, and an economic tool that looks for having better revenues for all the value chain. Also, we try to highlight the importance of the GIs in relation to protecting specific product. I was speaking about the link just before, but we have specific product with specific know-how, and what is recognized through the GI is this know-how that passed from generation to generation, which is still existing in the geographical area. As I mentioned before, GI are also an economic tool because it can enable to generate value for the producer at all the value chain and all the territories. We have some examples everywhere in the world today that having some GI functioning correctly, we can have some kind of vehicle for local development for all the territory with connected economies thanks to the geographical indication. And also we have a tool that can protect not only the producers, the territory, but also the consumers looking for a better guarantee and some specificities guaranteed in this tool. So we explain all of these assets. We also introduce the explanation of the GI protection regimes because we have obviously, and it is the case in Jamaica, you have a specific sui generis system, a specific legal system protecting the geographical indication, but we have also some other legal perspectives that can enable the protection of, well, like a geographical indication, like in the collective or certification trademarks, but we have also some specific administrative laws that can also protect some specific products. So we also covered and try to explain that, because if it is not the case in Jamaica, you can look for also the protection of your GI product through other legal tools in other countries. So it covers all the protection purposes that can exist for GI or origin link products. We provided also some illustration of the sui generis protection and some illustration of national logos for GI. So we use the one from Jamaica, but also the one in Japan. Not all the countries in the world have a national logo, but we recommend to have a logo that will be present on the labeling of the product, trying, well, to make or to have a family of GI recognized by the consumers on the market. We have also some certification trademarks, as we mentioned before, that protect some specific origin-linked products. So you have the Blue Mountain coffee in Jamaica, but we have also this trademark for cocoa in Trinidad and Tobago. And as I mentioned before, we presented some international agreements and standards and best practices concerning the GI protection. So we will find all the information on this aspect in the manual. This was the first part trying to introduce the geographical indication questions and I mean challenges and importance in this paragraph. Now we have 3 different types of chapters dedicated to 3 different targets. The first target of this chapter 2, is the manual for the producers. In this manual, the objective is for a producer that knows nothing about the geographical indication is to understand how can I apply to my IP office and how can I build a GI application, okay? So it's a very general way of building up the application, obviously. So we develop a paragraph on the GI eligibility. What type of name can I choose, or what type of name, or what are the prohibitions in terms of GI eligibility? We also explain how the GI application is built in terms of content. So in terms of applicants, information to provide, in terms of specification, but because there is more or less, I would say, an overall content of GI specification, which is recognized more or less at international level. We also made some explanation on the control documents we will also find on the last chapter, and also some different types of information you can provide to the IP office. We explained the registration procedure, and also something very important is the GI daily management, because the GI, the GI management will start from the registration, and there is a huge work to be provided by the producer once the GI is registered. So to summarize, as we mentioned before, a GI is a name with geographical significance that is linked to a product. This product has a reputation, a characteristic, or a quality that is linked to its geographical origin. And this is the whole thing that make the GI eligible. So all these conditions shall be met. Okay. So in terms of protected product, we have agricultural product, processed product, handicraft product most of the time. What is not protected generally are the service. We also provided some explanation on the prohibition or the barriers to the GI protection. So there are some different types of conditions that prevent the GI registration, and we prefer to give you the information so that you can think about that before applying for a GI that could not be registrable because of these prohibitions. So all these conditions are explained in the manual, and we provided also some concrete examples. Concerning the applicant eligibility, something which is very important because the GI are products that belong to the common heritage of a territory. It can be at local level, at regional level, or at national level. What is important is to consider the legitimacy of the GI applicant, meaning you cannot give or grant the GI application to only one person, or to provide a monopoly to people that do not represent, the collectiveness of this common heritage. So we try to explain this condition in the manual, and that's why we highlighted also on the importance of having most of the time a collective group that bring the GI application to the IP office around a common strategy to develop the value chain of this product in the concerned territory. So well, as we mentioned, applying as a collective group is a key factor for the success of GI, but also we have some exceptions sometimes. We also mention in the manual concerning the single applicant. Concerning the content of the GI application, normally in the GI application, you will explain who is the applicant. You will provide a specification explaining how the product is made or manufactured or processed. You will explain also some elements of the traceability. We can find then in the control process. And also you can add what is called note for instance. It means the motivation and the merits of the GI application that make or that brings some information to the IP office understanding the legitimacy of the GI application. This is not compulsory, but sometimes it is interesting to understand why this group of producers apply for a GI. So we also explain the content of the GI specification, and we provide all the detailed information on each part of the content. Concerning the registration procedure, well, it's more or less easy. You apply for registration. There are some exchanges with the IP office. There is an examination, a substantive examination based on this element and mainly the specification that are made by the IP office. Once the IP office, I will say, agree with the content of the application is published for opposition, and in this moment you have 2 or 3 months. During this time, any interested person can oppose the GI application based on legal grounds that are normally mentioned in the law. Then the IP office will consider this opposition when there are some opposition. If there is no opposition, the IP office will register the GI application, and there is a publication, and then normally the GI applicant will grant a certificate and will be considered as the right holder of the geographical indication. Then, once the GI is registered, you need to make the GI live daily. So in this case, the GI applicant become what we call the GI holder, and well, it will be the very important part of the GI life. And I guess that Christopher will discuss about that and show some concrete example afterwards. GI right holder have some missions to implement daily. I mean, all the meetings with the stakeholders, ensuring that the stakeholders will respect the specification that have been recognized with the GI registration. They can provide assistance to members. They can be involved in the communication and promotion activities, in the legal protection activities. So there is an importance to consider this mission to implement the GI so that the GI can be a success in the time. So we explain all of these missions, and we also explain that the GI right holders will be the center of everything, because it will be the contact point or the focal point for all the stakeholders around the geographical indication. This was very, very briefly the part dedicated to the producers. Then we developed a part dedicated for the IPO examiners in order to make easier the examination of a geographical indication. So in this part, we develop some information concerning the GI application, then the GI registration procedure, and also, because it was raised during the meeting in Alicante, some issues concerning the GI protection and what an IPO can do and cannot do. So, concerning the GI application, it is very important to consider in the legal framework the authority that would be competent to manage the GI system. And then sometimes this authority can play an important role in the protection, in the recognition and the protection of geographical indication. And I suppose that in Jamaica it is the case. So we explain some missions that can be undertaken by the IP office in relation to GI matters, like provided technical assistance before the registration, receiving obviously the GI application, carrying out the examination, formal and substantive examination, monitoring and sometimes canceling the GI, and also monitoring the trademarks, because once you will have a GI in your system, you need to manage the trademarks application that could be the name of a GI that will be protected within your legal system. So more or less here you can find the missions that can be undertaken by the competent authority concerned as IP office. We also develop some other missions the IP office can consider that can be covered by the law. So we also try to explain the application process. So I will not enter into too many details, but you can see based on the model law, well, all the scheme of the GI application process, and I make a summary just before for the part concerning the producer. So we try to explain each part since the application, concerning the application, formal application, then substantive application, the opposition process, and all the things you have to consider when you are a GI examiner. So concerning the applicant, I will not repeat what I said just before, but let me highlight the importance to consider the legitimacy of the GI applicant in terms of representing the producers in the ground, trying also in the case of single applicant, trying to catch if there is, well, the last person, of if this person is not making a monopoly for its interest. And also you need to consider that when you have a group of producers, that this group of producers should be based on a non-profit basis. I mean, there is not a group of producers that is here only to make money and to catch all the added value, not for the benefit of the producer. So there are some things you have to consider, and I know this is not the same work you have to do when you have a trademark application, but considering the legitimacy of producer is very important. Okay. Then, well, concerning the examination process, so, well, you have obviously to mark the application when an application comes at your office. You have to go through the examination process, and I mentioned that there is a formal application and then a substantive application. We also highlight the fact that we know that the work on the GI system sometimes is not so easy because it's technical issues, it's agronomy, sometimes it can be very scientific matters, and the IP office can be helped by specific experts that can help in the examination and trying to catch the objectivity or, well, the errors that are inscribed in the specification. And then all of this work can lead to the acceptance or the refusal of the examination. So concerning the GI examination process, there are some key steps that have to be undertaken by the examiners. So first of all, I mean, the most important thing is to check the GI eligibility. So first of all is to check if all the requirements you have within your law have been complied by the application. Okay, so it's normally legal criteria that have to be checked first of all. Also, you need to check, and sometimes it is better that the producer do so before trying to check the opposition objection that have been made to the application, and also check the legitimacy of the objection of opposition, if they comply with the requirements of the law. Then you need to consider the objection or the opposition, whether they are I mean, relevant or not in relation to the GI application. Sometimes you can have also some political pressure on this matter, and then you will take the decision on registering the geographical indication or not. If you register the geographical indication, you need to publish and then to grant a certificate sometimes. But we recommend you grant a certificate to the GI applicants. And so we explain all of these processes in the manual. Well, this is all the steps to be undertaken by an examiner. So this is what I already said. What I can highlight also, and we discussed that many times with the IP offices from the project, and at the time of objection or opposition phase, do not hesitate to undertake I mean, no negotiation, but trying to make the parties discussing and trying to find some solutions in order, to go ahead to make some progress with the GI application. It is not possible all the time, but in terms of IP office, we would recommend, you try to make the parties discussing in order to find a solution that would be acceptable for everyone. Concerning the GI protection, once the GI is registered, your law will provide some different types of legal instruments, in order to protect the geographical indication. So what we did in this part is trying to summarize some different cases of GI abuses or misuses you can find in the market, so they are classical one. We also try to explain the relationships between geographical indication and trademarks, because it's something very, very important. And we also try to address the enforcement aspects and the ex officio action. I mean, the ex officio action is the action that can be undertaken by public bodies, which is not compulsory, but that can happen sometimes. And also we highlighted the fact that the GI users, I mean the people within the group of producers or within the GI right holders, should be identified to know who is implementing or using the geographical indication. And sometimes these GI users are published in the IPO website, so it can be an interesting information for the consumers. This was the chapter 3 concerning the IP offices and trying to explain all the processes of registration. I forgot to say also that in this chapter, we took all the elements of the specification and we explain all the part of the specification, how they should be examined by the IP office as well. So the last part, and I will finish. I hope I'm still on time. So if not, Wendy, you can stop. So the last chapter is a specific chapter dedicated to the GI controls. So it's mostly dedicated for control bodies, but the producers and also the IP offices can have a look at it. So in this chapter, we describe the importance of the controls, and also we explain the control procedures. So the main objective is to understand the mechanism of GI control, because GI is a scheme, is a quality scheme. So as a quality scheme, it deserves to be controlled. We try to explain also the traceability process, and also we provide some elements helping the bureaus of standard or the certification bodies to draft a control plan for the future GIs in the countries. So, as I mentioned before, what is important on GI is to provide this special link between the product and its origin. So the main element of the control system will be to monitor how these specificities and these qualities are respected by the producers. So what we need to know is that the GI control are based on a compulsory basis, and well, GI are not, I mean that GI system is a voluntary system, but once you enter into a GI and you want to use a GI, you need to be controlled. Okay, and also the role of the GI right holder is very crucial in order to guarantee the correct implementation of the production rules, and then that will be helpful in terms of respecting the specifications. So very short elements on the GI controls. You need to know that I say what I do and I do what I say. So what is written in the specification is what I do. Okay. So the specification will be highly linked with the control plan. So every point in script in the specification will be dealt in the control plan. You need to make also easy, so trying to match as much as possible with the realness in the ground, not inventing some new practices of production you are not able to implement on the ground, because also the control means some cost. I will not mean high cost, but some cost you need to pay when you are audited. And you need also to think about the adaptation of the control system for the GI to the producer. If you have an overloaded specification and very high level, which is not corresponding to the practice on the ground, it will be impossible to implement the GI and the control. So you make easy, and then you see if all the things can be controlled. Well, some very key points on the control: impartiality, objectivity. Control means assurance for the consumer, or guarantee for the consumer. Once you accept to be controlled, you have a responsibility to respect the specification, even if sometimes you make some mistakes. We are all human. Okay. And these controls, and I mean, most of the time the certification can be meaningful when you have product traded at the international level. So in terms of GI control, most of the time you will cover the origin of the product, the respect of the specification, and for some product, not all of them, you will have also some controls on the product itself. And I guess that Christopher will speak about that for the ROM. There are some tasting panels, and I think this is the same for Jamaican jerk, well, which is not the case, obviously, for stones or ceramics, something like that. The types of control we can implement for GI matters: we have the self-control, which is the control implemented by the producers themselves. We can have an internal control, which is the control which is implemented by the GI group or the GI right holder. And then we have some external controls, that is the control made by an external body. That can be a certification body, an official body, an official national body, or a bureau of standards. The key information on the GI control we provided also in the manual is defining the type of different evaluations that can be implemented for the producers. The different types of body are already mentioned. The criteria that allow for establishing a control plan. Also, the different types of sanctions that can be implemented in case of non-compliance, and also an explanation of the GI control process by type of stakeholder, because all the controls are not the same depending on the stakeholders. On the manual, maybe by the end of the month, so we can finalize all the documents, and then a finalized version will be provided once the comments will be received. You can, I don't know if you have the last draft of the manual. I recommend you have a look at it, and I remain with my colleague at your disposal to answer all of your questions. I hope I was not too long. Thank you for your attention.